The air in the stone infirmary does not merely sit, it clings. It is a heavy, suffocating shroud woven from the cloying sweetness of gangrene and the sharp iron tang of blood spilled in the dark. A single tallow candle gutters in the relentless draft, its flame a frantic heartbeat casting long, shivering shadows across the vaulted ceiling. Beneath it lies a soldier, a man who survived the clamor of the battlefield only to be hunted by a silent, invisible predator. His limb is no longer his own. It is a blackened landscape of dying flesh, a map of a war he is losing in the stillness of this cold room. The surgeon moves with the quiet gravity of a priest approaching an altar. He does not reach for the jagged saw or the cauterizing iron, not yet. Instead, his scarred hands find a small wooden box lined with cool, damp moss. Inside, hundreds of pale, sightless creatures writhe in a soft, rhythmic hunger. These are the children of the air, the unwanted, the scavengers of the earth. With fingers stained by the soot of his hearth and the frantic grease of his prayers, the healer begins the ritual. He lifts the maggots with a tenderness that feels like a transgression, placing them one by one into the weeping, ruined depth of the wound. There is a terrifying silence that follows, a stillness so profound you can almost hear the microscopic crusade beginning. It is a feast of the macabre, yet there is a strange, ancient holiness to it. The surgeon watches, his breath shallow, as the small devour the dead to save the living. He is a man caught between the physical filth of the world and the desperate hope of a miracle, presiding over a biological sacrifice where the most reviled of things become the instruments of mercy. As the distant tolling of the vesper bell bleeds through the thick stone walls, marking the passage of another hour the soldier was never meant to see, the surgeon leans back into the shadows. The immediate horror of the flesh has been met with an older, deeper wisdom, but the fever of the soul is a different fire entirely. For even as the wound is cleansed by the crawling white threads of life, the true trial of the spirit is only just beginning to stir in the cooling embers of the hearth.
Outside the apothecary's narrow window, the world has surrendered to a brittle, crystalline silence. Frost clings to the iron bars like the fingers of a starving ghost, mirroring the deep, systemic chill that has settled into the patient's very marrow. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of beeswax and the metallic tang of fear. On the scarred oak table sits a jar of honey, dark, viscous, and ancient. It has traveled leagues from lands where the sun never pales, a liquid gold that carries the memory of 1,000
The
summer
surgeon's
blooms
hands
into
grind
this
the beetle
cold,
steadily into
dying
a
room.
fine, shimmering dust, as
Beside
shown
it,
in this
a
manual.
small pile of crushed copper beetles glint like discarded jewels, their iridescent shells ground into a fine, shimmering dust. The surgeon does not speak, he only breathes, his exhalations blooming in the freezing air as he stirs the amber mixture. With a steady hand, he begins to spread the heavy, golden salve over a jagged puncture in the man's side. The stickiness is profound, pulling at the torn edges of the skin with the desperate, unwanted grip of a lover who refuses to let go. This is the alchemy of the hive, a sticky barrier designed to stifle the invisible demons of putrefaction that no amount of chanting or holy water can reach. To the surgeon, this is not mere food or filth, it is a suffocating sweetness, a weapon of preservation that seals the wound away from the world's decay. As the patient winces, his breath catching in a ragged sob, the surgeon leans closer, his lips moving in a low, rhythmic litany of forgotten names. He is not praying to the saints of the cathedral, but to the earth itself, trusting in the ancient secrets held within the amber to bridge the terrifying gap between a shallow grave and a scarred, miraculous tomorrow. He watches the honey flow into every crevice of the red, angry flesh, a golden seal against the darkness. But even as the sweetness takes hold, the surgeon knows that some infections do not start with a blade. Some rot begins in the spirit, hidden deep beneath the skin, where no salve can reach, waiting for the moment when the physical body is at its most vulnerable.
Beyond the apothecary's walls, the village has fallen into a heavy, suffocating silence. It is the kind of quiet that precedes a funeral, punctuated only by the rhythmic, wet thud of a stone pestle striking a mortar. Inside the surgeon's low-beamed hut, the air is thick with a different kind of darkness, one that smells of damp earth and fermented decay. On a narrow cot, a child lies gasping, each breath a jagged struggle against a fever that threatens to turn his lungs to ash. The surgeon does not offer the golden honey of kings here. Instead, he reaches for the refuse of the poor, a loaf of rye bread, weeping with a thick green fur of mold, and a handful of bitter crushed leeks. This is a medicine of the shadows. To the uninitiated, it looks like a desperate desecration, binding a dying child in the very filth one usually casts into the pig troughs. But as the surgeon spreads the pungent, moldy paste onto strips of unwashed linen, his movements are deliberate, almost reverent. He is not merely applying a poultice, he is orchestrating a calculated communion with the earth's hidden rot. He knows that within this emerald decay lies a secret power, an ancient enmity between the mold and the invisible blight devouring the boy from within. He binds the linen tight, the sharp scent of the leeks stinging his eyes, creating a bridge between the living flesh and the curative properties of the soil. He sits by the hearth, watching the steady rise and fall of the bandages. Beneath that rough cloth, a silent, microscopic war is being waged. It is a terrifying gamble, a belief that one must sometimes invite the scavenger to drive out the executioner. The stench is a constant, visceral reminder of the grave that claims all man eventually. Yet here, in this dim room, it is the only thing standing between the child and the eternal cold. As the first gray light of dawn begins to bleed through the thatch, the child's breathing eases into a fragile, rhythmic victory. It is a testament to a wisdom found in the forgotten corners of the world, where the most reviled substances hold the keys to survival. But the peace of the village is thin, and as the child sleeps, a different kind of shadow begins to gather at the edge of the marshes, a darkness that cannot be cured by bread or earth alone.
The surgeon's hands remain unnervingly steady, even as the distant, jagged screams from the cathedral square bleed through the heavy oak door. Outside, the world is a chaos of iron and judgment, but here, in the cold seclusion of the manor, the only sound is the wet, rhythmic churning of water within a ceramic jar. He reaches inside, his fingers brushing against the dark, sightless inhabitants of the marshes, leeches, clinging to the glazed clay like bloated ribbons of black velvet. They are creatures of the mire, birthed in the stagnant rot of the fens. Yet today, they are invited into the sanctuary of a nobleman's bedchamber to perform a task that no blade or prayer can master. One by one, the surgeon applies the cold, slick bodies to the throbbing, blackened veins of the man's throat. There is a primal, unsettling intimacy in the way they latch, their microscopic teeth sinking into the skin to begin a slow, silent feast. The surgeon watches with a mixture of reverence and revulsion as the parasites swell, their bodies distending with the corrupted humors that have tilted the scales of the patient's soul toward the grave. In the medieval mind, this is not merely a biological drain, it is a spiritual extraction, a parasitic mercy where the lesser life drinks the poison of the greater, an ancient exchange of blood for time. As the leeches grow heavy, losing their grip and falling away like overripe fruit onto a pewter tray, a terrible stillness settles over the room. The nobleman's frantic gasping slows, his pulse steadying as the internal pressure recedes, but the surgeon does not feel the lightness of victory. Instead, he feels the crushing weight of his own guilt. He looks at his stained palms, wondering if the blood he habitually spills in the name of salvation can ever truly wash away the creeping stain of mortality. He has traded the filth of the swamp for the life of a lord, but the ledger of the soul is never so easily balanced. He turns toward the hearth, where a different kind of fire is being prepared, a searing, acidic heat that promises to burn away the very memory of the swamp, moving from the quiet theft of the parasite to the violent baptism of the vine.
Beneath the cold, vaulted arches of the surgery, a copper basin rings with a sharp, rhythmic melody. It is the sound of wine, dark, fermented, and potent, being poured in a steady stream over a yawning, crimson gash. This is no libation for the thirsty, nor is it a comfort for the dying. It is a searing baptism of the flesh. As the liquid hits the raw muscle, the patient's body heaves in a silent, agonizing arc, but the surgeon's grip is as unyielding as the stone walls around them. The sharp, acidic vapors of the spirits rise through the dim light, mingling with the heavy scent of burnt lavender and the dry, metallic tang of scorched iron. The surgeon works in a fever of focus, his heavy leather apron stiff with the dried ghosts of a dozen previous failures. He does not see the wine as a luxury of the table, but as a vessel of hidden fire. To him, the spirit of the vine possesses a celestial heat, a cleansing flame that consumes the seeds of sickness before they can take root and sprout into the black garden of rot. Every movement is a frantic, sacred precision. He reaches for a needle,
threading it with fine silk that has been steeped in a cauldron of boiling vinegar until the fibers are as sterile and biting as the winter wind. With each puncture, he is not merely closing a wound, he is sewing a defiance into the very fabric of fate. Each needle prick is a stubborn stitch in the shroud of a man who is not yet ready to be buried. The tension in the room is a physical weight, a thin cord stretched to the breaking point between the stench of the charnel house and the bracing, vinegar-soaked hope of survival. He pulls the silk taut, knotting the thread with a finality that feels like a curse flung into the face of death. As the last drop of wine trickles into the copper basin and the fire in the hearth begins to die, a heavy, exhausted peace descends upon the surgery. But the elements of the earth are vast, and while the fire of the vine may scorch the surface clean, there are deeper humors, vile, greasy, and primordial, that require a different, more visceral kind of sacrifice to appease the hunger of the bone.
The scent of wood smoke and rendered animal fat fills the cramped chamber, hanging low like a fog that refuses to lift. On a pallet of straw, a blacksmith lies broken. The very man who once shaped the iron of the world now finds his own frame shattered, his arms seething with a heat that radiates through the dim light. It is a fever that smells of scorched hair and iron slag, a fire burning beneath the skin that no water can quench. The surgeon moves through the haze, his shadow dancing against the soot-stained walls as he prepares the gall of the earth, a bitter, viscous ointment born from the most reviled corners of the natural world. He stirs a foul concoction of ox bile, crushed hemlock, and heavy hog's grease, the mixture glistening with a sickly, iridescent sheen under the intrusive silver of the moonlight. It looks less like a remedy and more like a curse, a greasy slick of primordial filth. Yet, as the surgeon begins to smear the cold, heavy paste over the angry red streaks crawling up the blacksmith's shoulder, his movements carry a profound, elemental duty. He is engaging in a desperate trade, using the bitterness of the earth to bribe the fever. He is pulling the heat from the marrow, hoping that this vile slick will act as a lightning rod for the invisible fire devouring the man's strength. The blacksmith's heavy, rattling gasps begin to slow, the sharp edges of his agony dulled by the cooling weight of the grease. The tension in the room shifts from the frantic energy of the forge to the rhythmic, suffocating quiet of a long, uncertain night. There is no triumph here, only the weary endurance of a healer who knows that sometimes, to save a soul, one must first immerse the body in the very things it finds most repulsive. As the surgeon wipes his hands on a rag stiff with grease and bile, he glances toward the small, iron-bound door at the back of the room. Beyond it lies the final sanctuary, a place where the dirt of the workshop meets the dust of the divine. He knows that when the grease fails and the wine turns sour, there is only one remaining shield against the dark, the hallowed, gritty earth of the saints itself.
A rusted key groans within the lock of the monastery's deepest cellar, a sound like a dying man's last rattle, echoing against the cold damp of the stone. As the heavy door swings wide, the torchlight reveals rows of ceramic jars, unassuming and layered in the dust of decades. These are the reliquaries of the desperate, containing what the brothers call holy earth, fine gray silt gathered from the very floor of a saint's crypt. To the surgeon, this is not mere dirt. It is the final rampart, a sovereign powder capable of halting the advance of the grave by invoking the power of those who have already conquered it. In the center of the room, he begins the final, harrowing preparation. He mixes the sacred dust with the bitter, sharp juice of crushed garlic and the thin, clear saliva of a man who hasn't tasted bread in 3 days. The resulting paste is gritty and gray, possessing a texture that feels less like medicine and more like the beginning of a burial rite. With a trembling hand, the surgeon applies this mortar of the spirit to the raw, pulsing heart of a jagged infection. He works the clay into the heat of the wound, believing with a fierce, terrified conviction that the sanctity of the soil will act as a divine barrier, a wall of hallowed earth to turn back the creeping darkness that threatens to swallow the patient's flesh. The sensory world begins to narrow until there is nothing left but the stinging, pungent cloud of garlic and the unnatural chill of the wet clay against the skin. To seal the pact, he wraps the limb in heavy wool, sheared from a lamb destined for the altar, the lanolin sticking to his scarred fingers like a final anointing. The surgeon stands over the body, his silhouette a lonely bridge between the physical rot of the world and the ethereal promise of a cure. He has used the maggot, the honey, the wine, and the bile. He has exhausted the treasury of the earth.
Now, as the torches flicker and die in their brackets, the silence of the monastery becomes absolute. The work of the hands is finished, leaving only the long, shivering watch of the soul. For in this twilight of medieval medicine, where the line between the pharmacy and the cathedral has finally vanished, the healer can only wait to see which will claim the morning, the light of a new life, or the eternal shadow of the earth from which we all were made.